Rjukan, a small town nestled deep within the shadowy folds of the Norwegian mountains, had always been shrouded in an almost mythic darkness. Each year, for nearly 6 months, the sun disappeared behind the towering peaks, leaving the town submerged in perpetual twilight. While the residents made do with artificial light and the warmth of their close-knit community, there were whispers, ancient tales passed down from elders to children of a beast that thrived in this darkness. These stories, once dismissed as mere folklore, took on a chilling reality one winter when strange occurrences began to plague the town. It started with the livestock. One by one, goats and sheep were found mutilated in the snow, their bodies torn apart with a savagery that defied explanation. Farmers whispered among themselves about massive claw marks gouged into the frozen earth around the corpses, but none dared speak too loudly of their fears. Some blamed wolves, others muttered about bears. But deep down, they all knew this was no ordinary predator. Knut Andersen, the town's unofficial historian, had always been fascinated by the old legends. He spent his evenings poring over brittle, yellowed pages in the town's library, searching for clues about the beast's origins. According to the oldest records, the creature was called the Morkabjorn, the dark bear, though descriptions of its appearance varied. Some said it had the form of a massive wolf with eyes like smoldering embers, others swore it was a grotesque amalgamation of man and beast, its limbs unnaturally long, its claws sharp enough to carve through bone. But one detail remained consistent across the centuries: the beast came when the darkness lingered, and it left only destruction in its wake. On a particularly frigid evening in late January, as the winds howled through the narrow streets, a scream pierced the silence. It came from the edge of town, near the forest. By the time the villagers arrived, lanterns bobbing in the gloom, they found only a shattered sleigh, its wooden fragments strewn across the snow. Blood trailed into the woods, but the tracks, deep, clawed impressions, were unlike anything anyone had seen before. Among the search party was Ingrid Halvorsen, a local teacher who had recently moved back to Rjukan after years in Oslo. She had grown up hearing the stories of the Morkabjorn but had always dismissed them as nonsense. Yet, standing at the edge of the forest that night, staring at the claw marks that seemed to pulse with an almost unnatural menace, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "We need to turn back," she urged the group. "If it's an animal, it's dangerous. We shouldn't risk it." But Lars, a burly woodsman with more pride than sense, scoffed. "It's just a bear. Maybe a big one, but nothing we can't handle." He hefted his rifle and trudged into the trees, ignoring Ingrid's protests. The others hesitated, torn between fear and the need to uncover the truth. Ultimately, only a few followed Lars into the woods. Ingrid stayed behind, her heart heavy with dread. Hours passed, and the search party did not return. By morning, the townsfolk organized a larger group to venture into the forest. They found Lars's rifle first, snapped clean in half as though it were a twig. Then, deeper in the woods, they discovered a clearing soaked in blood. The snow was churned and stained red, the air thick with the metallic tang of violence. Of the search party, there was no sign. That day, the mayor called an emergency meeting at the town hall. The room buzzed with tension as theories were thrown about: rogue bears, escaped wolves, even a crazed hermit living in the mountains. But Knut stood and cleared his throat, silencing the crowd. "We all know what this is," he said gravely. "It's the Morkabjorn. The beast has returned." His words were met with a mixture of scoffs and murmurs. Yet, for every skeptical voice, there was another that whispered agreement. The older residents, in particular, looked grim. "If it is the beast," Knut continued, "we must act quickly. The old stories tell us it cannot be killed by conventional means. It fears fire, and silver can wound it, but to truly banish it, we must find its lair and destroy its heart." The room fell silent. Destroy its heart? It sounded like madness. But with each passing day, the unease in Rjukan deepened. More livestock vanished. Strange shadows flickered at the edges of the town. And always, there was the sense of being watched, as though the darkness itself had eyes. Ingrid couldn't shake the feeling that the key to stopping the beast lay in the town's history. She joined Knut in his research, combing through ancient texts and journals. One account, written by a priest in the 17th century, stood out. It spoke of a ritual performed by the Sami, the indigenous people of northern Scandinavia, to bind the Morkabjorn. The ritual required 3 items: a flame kindled from birchwood struck by lightning, a shard of silver blessed under the new moon, and the blood of a pure-hearted individual. "It's our best chance," Canute said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "But the blood," he trailed off, unwilling to voice the implication. "I'll do it," Ingrid said quietly. "If it means saving the town, I'll do it." Canute looked at her, his eyes filled with both admiration and sorrow. "We'll prepare the ritual. But first, we need to lure the beast out." That night, the townsfolk gathered in the square, their faces pale but resolute. They lit torches and carried them to the edge of the forest, creating a ring of fire to protect themselves. In the center of the clearing, a goat was tethered to a post, bleating nervously. The plan was simple: draw the beast into the open, weaken it with silver-tipped arrows, and perform the ritual. Hours passed, and the tension grew unbearable. The flames flickered in the biting wind, casting long, eerie shadows. Then, just as some began to doubt the plan, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the trees. The beast emerged. It was unlike anything they had imagined. Towering over the tallest man, its form was a grotesque amalgamation of fur, muscle, and shadow. Its eyes burned like coals, and its maw dripped with a black ichor that hissed as it hit the snow. The Morkabjorn moved with an almost unnatural fluidity, its elongated limbs ending in claws that glinted like steel. The townsfolk froze, paralyzed by terror. But Ingrid stepped forward, clutching a silver-tipped spear. "Now," she shouted, snapping them out of their stupor. Arrows flew, some striking their mark and causing the beast to howl in pain. But it was fast, too fast. It tore through the ranks with horrifying efficiency, scattering the villagers like leaves. Ingrid darted through the chaos, holding the sacred items for the ritual. She reached the center of the clearing, where Canute was waiting with the birchwood flame and the silver shard. "We have to end this now," she yelled. Canute nodded, his hands shaking as he began the chant. The beast, sensing the threat, turned its glowing eyes on them and charged. Time seemed to slow as Ingrid raised the silver shard and plunged it into her palm, letting her blood drip onto the flame. The fire roared to life, its light searing through the darkness like a beacon. The beast faltered, its form wavering as though caught between worlds. Canute's voice grew louder, the ancient words echoing through the clearing. With a final, deafening roar, the Morkabjorn collapsed, its body disintegrating into ash that scattered in the wind. When the sun finally returned to Rjukan, the town was forever changed. The scars of that night would never fully heal, but the people took solace in the knowledge that the beast was gone. Ingrid, hailed as a hero, bore the physical and emotional wounds of her sacrifice but found comfort in the resilience of her community. And though the darkness would return each winter, the townsfolk knew they had the strength to face it together.